The grand hall of the Galactic Coalition stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal and floating platforms. Representatives from 247 species filled the chamber, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, growls, melodic tones, and electronic translations. At the center platform stood Ambassador Elena Kowalski, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched another debate spiral into threats. The Krolthar delegation was arguing again. Their kind always argued. They were massive creatures, standing nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms and thick armored plates covering their bodies. War was in their blood, or so they claimed. Warlord Krolthar slammed one of his fists against the podium, making the translators crackle. The Vexian colonies expand into our territory, and this council does nothing. His voice boomed across the chamber. We demand action or we will take it ourselves. Elena had heard this speech before. Everyone had. The Krolthar made threats every few cycles. The council debated, and eventually someone proposed a compromise that satisfied no one but prevented war. It was exhausting work, but it was necessary work. She prepared to step forward with another mediation proposal when she noticed the Vexian ambassador's scales had shifted to an aggressive red pattern. Perhaps the Krolthar should learn restraint, the Vexian hissed. Or perhaps they need another lesson in humility. The chamber erupted in arguments. Species took sides. Old alliances flared into new tensions, and Elena felt the familiar weight of futility pressing on her shoulders. She activated her platform's speaker system. Honored delegates, please. Violence serves no one. If we could just examine the territorial surveys, the humans speak of peace again. Krolthar's laugh was like grinding metal. Tell me, Ambassador, when has your species ever done anything but talk? You file complaints, you write reports, you negotiate treaties that others break. Your people are merchants and diplomats, nothing more. Several delegates made sounds of agreement. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Elena kept her expression neutral, though her jaw tightened slightly. This was not the first time someone had called humans weak. It would not be the last. Diplomacy prevents bloodshed, she said calmly. Surely that is a goal we all share. Diplomacy is what the weak call surrender, Krolthar replied. He turned to address the full council. The humans have been in this coalition for 200 years. In that time, they have never once responded to aggression with force. Their cargo ships are raided, they file reports. Their colonies are threatened, they request sanctions. Even when my fleet destroyed their mining station last cycle, killing 300 of their workers, what did they do? They asked for an apology. The chamber went quiet. Elena's hands tightened behind her back, her nails digging into her palms. She remembered that mining station. She had known people there. The Krolthar had claimed it was a navigation error, an accident. Everyone knew it was not. We believe in proportional response, Elena said, her voice carefully controlled. And we believe in giving others the opportunity to correct their mistakes. Proportional response. Krolthar repeated the words like they were poisonous. Your species has no idea what real strength looks like. You are prey animals playing at politics. In the observation gallery above, Admiral Marcus Chen watched the exchange with dark eyes. He was a compact man with gray at his temples and hands that never quite stopped moving. Right now, those hands were gripping the railing hard enough to make his knuckles white. Beside him, his aide cleared her throat softly. Sir, perhaps we should remind the Council about the Defense Fleet exercises scheduled for next month. No. Chen's voice was quiet. Let them think what they want to think. But sir, the Krolthar attacks are escalating. This is the 5th incident in 3 months. Eventually they will push too far. Chen interrupted. His eyes never left the chamber floor below. And when they do, the entire galaxy will learn something they should have left unknown. The aide looked at her commander with concern. She was young, only 30 years old, and had grown up in a galaxy where humans were known as peaceful traders. She had studied human history in school, of course, but those lessons felt distant and abstract. Ancient wars fought with primitive weapons on a single planet, long before humanity reached the stars. Chen had lived through different times. He had been a young officer during the last conflict on Earth, the final war before humanity made its choice. He remembered what humans could become when pushed. He prayed daily that the galaxy would never have to see it. Below, the council session was concluding. The Krolthar delegation had successfully blocked any sanctions, citing the lack of concrete evidence. The Vexian ambassador glared at them but said nothing. Elena gathered her data tablets and prepared to leave. her expression professionally blank. As she walked through the corridors back to the human embassy section, other delegates gave her sympathetic looks or avoided her gaze entirely. Everyone knew the Krolthar were testing boundaries. Everyone expected humans to eventually abandon their colonies or pay tribute to avoid conflict. It was what prey species did when predators circled. Elena entered her office and locked the door behind her. Only then did she allow her professional mask to slip. She sat at her desk and pulled up the casualty reports from the mining station attack. 317 dead. Men, women, families who had gone to the outer systems to build new lives, gone because someone wanted to prove a point. Her communication console chimed. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen. Elena, we need to talk about contingencies. Not yet, Marcus. We can still manage this through diplomatic channels. For how long? Chen leaned forward. They are not going to stop. Krolthar has been promoted within his military for his aggressive stance against us. He is building a reputation on humiliating humanity. Each time we turn the other cheek, they hit harder. Elena closed her eyes. If we respond with force, we validate everything they say about us. We become just another aggressive species fighting for territory and pride. And if we do not respond, we validate their belief that we are helpless. There is a difference between choosing peace and accepting victimhood. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. If it comes to that, if we truly have no other choice, will we be able to stop once we start? Chen's expression was grave. That is the question our ancestors struggled with for thousands of years. That is why we made the choice we did when we joined this coalition. But Elena, we also made another choice. We decided that if peace ever truly failed, if we were ever forced to fight again, we would remember every lesson our history taught us. We would remember why we stopped fighting in the first place. 3 days later, the communication came through. The Krolthar fleet had taken position around New Haven, a human agricultural colony of 2 million people. They were demanding supplies, territory concessions, and a formal acknowledgement of Krolthar superiority. They gave humanity 12 hours to comply. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives scrambled to their platforms expecting to witness humanity's surrender. The betting pools among the more cynical species gave odds on how quickly humans would capitulate. Ambassador Elena Kowalski stood at the human platform. Her face was calm, but something in her eyes had changed. The entire chamber waited for her to begin the familiar ritual of protests and diplomatic appeals. Instead, she spoke 7 words that would echo across the galaxy for generations. You have been warned enough. What happens next is on you. Then she turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving 246 species staring after her in confused silence. Only Admiral Chen, watching from the observation gallery, understood what those words truly meant. The waiting was over. Humanity's long peace was about to end, and the galaxy was about to learn what humans had really been hiding for 200 years. Warlord Krolthar reviewed the human ambassador's statement with his command staff aboard his flagship. The massive vessel hung in orbit above New Haven like a predator circling wounded prey. Around him, his officers displayed various expressions of amusement and contempt. They warned us, one officer said with a clicking laugh. What will they do, file another formal complaint? Krolthar studied the agricultural colony below. 2 million humans living in biodomes and terraformed valleys, growing food for other human worlds. It was defenseless except for some basic cargo shuttles and civilian satellites, the perfect target to make his point. He had climbed to his position by being bold where others hesitated. This would be his crowning achievement. Open a channel to the colony. Let them see what happens when they defy the Krolthar Empire. The bombardment lasted 40 minutes. Krolthar was careful to target only the orbital stations where the colony's administration was located. He wanted to send a message, not depopulate a potential tribute world. The explosions were beautiful against the black of space, each one taking human lives and human hope. When it was over, 50,000 humans were dead. The colony below was intact but leaderless and terrified. Krolthar broadcast his terms again, this time without the pretense of negotiation. New Haven would provide food supplies to Krolthar military outposts. They would pay an annual tribute. They would acknowledge Krolthar authority. Then he made his final decision. He ordered the entire attack recorded and transmitted across the galactic communication networks. Every species with the technology to receive broadcasts would see it. They would see human defiance broken. They would see the price of challenging Krultar's strength. The response was immediate. Across the galaxy, other aggressive species took notice. If the Krultar could attack humans with impunity, perhaps others could as well. Within days, 3 other species moved fleets toward human territories. The Vexian Empire seized a human research station. The Torgash clans claimed a human asteroid mining operation. The Zelthrak Collective demanded passage rights through human space. In the Galactic Council chambers, representatives gathered in emergency session. Many species expressed concern, but few were willing to act. The Krultar were powerful, and humans had never shown any capacity for military response. Some delegates quietly suggested that perhaps humans should accept their position as a client species to stronger powers. It was simply the natural order of things. But in the archives deep beneath the council headquarters, a Quillari scholar named Thelnora was discovering something that made her blood run cold. The Quillari were a peaceful species, devoted to knowledge and historical preservation. They had been among humanity's strongest advocates in the council, drawn to human art and philosophy. Thelnora had spent years studying Earth culture. Now, reviewing the files that Ambassador Kowalski had submitted before her departure, Thelnora was beginning to understand why the humans had always seemed so deliberately restrained. The data packet was enormous. Military records spanning over 5,000 years. Wars numbered not in dozens but in thousands. Weapons that should not have been possible for a pre-spaceflight civilization. Something called nuclear weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Conflicts that killed millions. Tens of millions, sometimes more. Thelnora's hands shook as she read through the translated documents. The Great War, the Second Great War. Regional conflicts that left landscapes poisoned for generations. A Cold War where 2 human nations had enough weapons to exterminate all life on their planet, and came terrifyingly close to using them. She found psychological studies of human combat veterans, analyses of tactical doctrines, entire academic fields dedicated to understanding warfare. Humans had not just fought wars, they had studied them, perfected them, turned violence into a science. But then something had changed. In the late 21st century, Earth had nearly destroyed itself in a final cascade of conflicts. Somehow humanity had pulled back from the brink. They had unified their planet not through conquest, but through the shared trauma of nearly becoming extinct by their own hands. When they reached space, they had made a collective decision: never again. Thelnora realized with growing horror that humanity's peaceful behavior in the coalition was not natural to them. It was a choice they made every single day, a choice to suppress instincts and capabilities that had been refined through millennia of constant warfare. She immediately sent her findings to the council leadership, flagging them as urgent. Most ignored her. A few reviewed the files with skepticism. Primitive history from a backward planet, they said. Irrelevant to modern galactic politics. Only a handful of military analysts from other species began to truly understand. A Vexian admiral pulled back the forces that had seized the research station without explanation. A Torgash clan leader quietly canceled the attack on the mining operation. They had read the files and seen what others missed. But Krultar did not read the files. He was too busy celebrating his victory. On Earth, Admiral Chen sat in a command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the Tibetan Plateau. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every human ship in the galaxy. Thousands of vessels from small patrol craft to massive carrier groups, all waiting for orders. His staff worked in silence, their faces grim. They were all volunteers, all fully briefed on what was being asked of them. Many were descendants of the last war generation, the humans who remembered what their species had been before the choice was made. Sir, the New Haven casualty reports are confirmed. 50,000 dead. The colony is requesting instructions. Chen nodded slowly. For 200 years, humanity had hoped this moment would never come. They had joined the Galactic Coalition with genuine intentions of peace. They had absorbed insults and provocations, filed diplomatic protests when they could have filed target coordinates, all in the hope that they could be different, that they could prove change was possible. But they had also prepared. Oh, how they had prepared. Communications. Send a system-wide broadcast to all Krultar forces in and around New Haven. They have 24 hours to withdraw their fleet and surrender Warlord Krultar for trial. After that deadline, we will consider them hostile combatants. His communications officer hesitated. "Sir, they outnumber our forces in that sector 3-1. Send the message." The broadcast reached Crowthor 6 hours later. He played it for his command staff, and their laughter echoed through the flagship's corridors. Humans were making demands now? Humans were threatening him? It was almost too perfect. He could destroy their pathetic response fleet and add that victory to his growing legend. He ordered his ships to battle, positions, and prepared to teach humanity its final lesson. Then his sensor officer's voice cut through the celebration. "Sir, we are detecting power signatures. Multiple contacts emerging from stealth." Crowthor looked at his tactical display. A dozen human ships appeared, their stealth systems disengaging. That was manageable. His fleet could handle a dozen ships easily. "More contacts, sir." 50 ships. 100. 200. The laughter died. Crowthor watched in disbelief as the tactical display lit up with contact markers. Human ships were appearing throughout the system, dropping their stealth fields like predators revealing themselves to surrounded prey. "How many?" Crowthor demanded. His sensor officer's voice was shaken. "Sir, I am reading over 3,000 vessels. Cruisers, destroyers, carrier groups, support craft. Sir, where did they all come from?" Admiral Chen watched the same tactical display from Earth. The pieces were in place. Humanity's hidden fleet, built and maintained in secret for 2 centuries, was now revealed to the galaxy. Ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers and mining vessels. Weapons platforms hidden in asteroids and supposedly defunct satellites. A military force that had been preparing for this exact scenario since the day humans joined the coalition. He opened a channel to all human forces. His voice was steady, but everyone who knew him could hear the profound sadness beneath the words. "This is Admiral Marcus Chen to all units. We spent 200 years trying to be better than our history. We wanted to prove that humanity could change, that we could choose peace over our nature. Some of you were born into this peace and never knew what we were. Others remember. All of you volunteered to carry this burden." He paused, looking at the faces of his bridge crew, young and old from every corner of human space, united in purpose and regret. The Krulthar have made their choice. Other species are watching to see what we will do. If we do nothing, they will hunt us until we are extinct or enslaved. If we act, we reveal what we have been hiding. There is no good choice here. There is only the choice to survive. Another pause. Somewhere on Earth, Elena Kowalski was watching the same displays, tears streaming down her face. She had tried so hard to prevent this moment. "Remember what we fight for. Remember why we stopped fighting in the first place. And remember that when this is over, we have to live with what we have become." Chen took a deep breath and gave the order he had hoped never to speak. "All units, engage." Across the New Haven system, 3,000 human warships opened fire simultaneously. The Krulthar fleet had seconds to process what was happening before their world turned into a storm of destruction. The galaxy's long peace was over. Humanity's secret was revealed. And Warlord Crowthor, in the final moments before his shields failed, finally understood what Ambassador Kowalski had been trying to tell him. The humans had not been weak. They had been waiting. The first Krulthar battle carrier died in 43 seconds. The second lasted only 38. By the time the third was destroyed, the Krulthar fleet had finally organized enough to return fire. But it made little difference. Human weapons were nothing like the energy beams and plasma cannons used by other coalition species. They were older, cruder, and absolutely devastating. Tungsten rods accelerated to relativistic speeds punched through Krulthar shields as if they were paper. Missiles carrying no warheads but simply too much kinetic energy turned armored hulls into clouds of shrapnel. Drone swarms launched from human carriers worked with mechanical precision, each unit communicating with thousands of others to overwhelm point defense systems through sheer coordinated numbers. Aboard his flagship, Krulthor gripped his command throne as another impact rocked the vessel. His tactical officer was shouting numbers that made no sense. "Their accuracy rate is 97%. Sir, they are targeting our weak points specifically. They know exactly where our shield generators are located. They know our armor gaps. It is like they have been studying our ships for years." They had. Every Krulthar vessel that had ever come near human space had been scanned, analyzed, and added to a targeting database. Humanity had been preparing for this war since before the Krulthar Empire had made first contact with the Coalition. They had been preparing for every war against every species just in case. Krulthor opened a channel to his fleet. All ships tactical retreat to rally point. A human voice cut through his transmission. It was Admiral Chen, speaking in perfect Krolthar, his accent flawless. Warlord Kralthor, your fleet has sustained 63% casualties in the first 8 minutes of engagement. Your flagship's main reactor is operating at 41% efficiency due to damage to coolant systems. Your life support will fail in approximately 90 minutes. Your shields will fail in 12 minutes. You have no realistic chance of victory or escape. Kralthor felt cold fear creep through him. How did they know all of this? His damage reports were encrypted. His systems hardened against infiltration. Chen continued in that same calm, terrible voice. I am giving you this information so you understand your situation completely. You have 2 choices. Surrender now and face trial for your actions, or continue fighting and be destroyed. Choose quickly. My patience has limits and I spent 2 centuries of it dealing with people like you diplomatically. The channel cut off. Kralthor looked at his officers, seeing his own fear reflected in their faces. This was not how war was supposed to work. In proper galactic combat, fleets maneuvered, commanders issued challenges, battles were fought with honor and ceremony. This was something else entirely. This was extermination. Sir, they are broadcasting on all frequencies, his communications officer reported. They are sending real-time analysis of our fleet movements to the entire galaxy. They are showing everyone exactly how they are destroying us. They want witnesses. It was true. Human ships were transmitting detailed tactical breakdowns of every engagement. Other species watching across the galaxy were seeing the Krolthar fleet, supposedly one of the most powerful military forces in the coalition, being systematically dismantled by a species that had never shown any military capacity before. On the Vexian homeworld, military analysts were in an emergency meeting. They were watching the battle feeds in stunned silence. One senior commander finally spoke. They have been lying to us. For 200 years, they have been pretending to be weak while building a war machine that makes our fleets look like children's toys. Not lying, another analyst corrected quietly. Hoping. They were hoping they would never need to reveal this. Look at their tactics. These are not new strategies they invented yesterday. These are refined doctrines tested and perfected over generations. They have been preparing for galactic war since before they left their home system. A younger officer pulled up Earth's historical files, the ones the Quillari scholar had tried to warn them about. Their last major war on their homeworld ended 278 years ago. Do you know how it ended? Not with conquest or surrender. It ended when both sides realized they had developed weapons that could sterilize their entire planet. They stopped fighting not because they wanted to, but because they had to. The meeting room fell silent. Then one of the senior commanders stood up. Contact our fleet. Any vessels currently in or near human territory are to withdraw immediately. Any planned operations against human assets are canceled. And someone get me a direct line to their Admiral Chen. Sir, we are not at war with the humans, not yet. And if I have anything to say about it, not ever. Get me that communication line. Now. Back at New Haven, the battle was entering its 2nd hour. The Krolthar fleet had been reduced to 37 ships from their original 119. They were in full retreat, trying to reach the system's edge to jump to faster-than-light travel. Human forces pursued them with mechanical efficiency, but something strange was happening. The humans were not destroying every ship they disabled. Vessels that surrendered and powered down their weapons were being boarded by human marines, not destroyed. Crews were being taken prisoner, not killed. The Krolthar wounded were receiving medical attention from human doctors. Thelnora, the Quillari scholar, was watching the broadcasts from her archive deep beneath the council headquarters. She had been trying to warn people for days, and now she was seeing her worst fears confirmed. But she was also seeing something else, something that gave her a strange sense of hope. They are holding back, she said to herself. Even now, even in the middle of this, they are trying to minimize casualties. They could destroy the entire Krolthar fleet in minutes, but they are giving them chances to surrender. She pulled up more historical files, reading accounts of human wars before spaceflight. She found records of conflicts where mercy was abandoned, where civilians became targets, where atrocities were committed in the name of victory. But she also found something else. A consistent thread through human history of soldiers who tried to maintain honor even in the worst circumstances. Rules of war. Geneva Conventions. Codes of conduct that humans developed to limit their own capacity for violence. The humans had not forgotten their history. They remembered the worst of what they had done. And even now, unleashing military power that terrified the galaxy. They were trying not to repeat those mistakes. But 3 other species had not learned this lesson yet. Emboldened by Kralthor's initial success, they had launched attacks on human colonies while the main fleet was engaged at New Haven. The Torgash clans hit a mining colony. The Zelthrek Collective attacked a research outpost. The Nerixian Compact tried to seize a human trading hub. They expected easy victories over lightly defended targets. Instead, they found that humanity had not just hidden one fleet. Every human colony had its own defense force. Every trading post had hidden weapons platforms. Every civilian ship had military-grade sensors and communication arrays, turning them into an intelligence network that covered all of human space. The Torgash attack lasted 11 minutes before their entire raiding force was destroyed. The Zelthrak forces surrendered after the first exchange of fire. The Nerixian ships tried to retreat, but found themselves trapped by human vessels that had somehow predicted their escape routes. Within 48 hours of the first shots being fired, 4 different species had attacked humanity. All 4 were losing badly. The galaxy was reeling from the revelation that the peaceful, diplomatic humans had been hiding a military capacity that exceeded most of the major powers combined. The Galactic Council tried to call for a ceasefire. Ambassador Kowalski appeared at the session via holographic link. She stood before the assembled delegates, her expression hard. For 200 years, this council maintained peace through the threat of collective action against aggressors. We joined this coalition believing in that promise. We filed complaints when we were attacked. We sought arbitration when we were insulted. We followed every procedure, honored every protocol, and trusted in the system you created. She paused, looking directly at the council leadership. And you did nothing. You watched as the Krolthar tested us, attacked us, killed our people. You placed bets on how quickly we would surrender. You advised us to accept tributary status. Some of you even suggested we deserved what was happening because we were too weak to defend ourselves. Another delegate tried to interrupt, but Elena spoke over them. You had centuries to enforce peace. You chose to watch. You chose to enable aggression because it was easier than confronting aggressors. So now you will witness what you have enabled. You will see what happens when the one species that truly understood the cost of war is forced to fight again. She disconnected, leaving the council in chaos. Some delegates were calling for sanctions against humanity. Others were quietly calculating how quickly they could arrange non-aggression pacts. A few were beginning to understand that the balance of power in the galaxy had fundamentally shifted. On Kralthor's flagship, alarms were screaming. His shields were failing, his weapons were offline, and human boarding craft were attaching to his hull. He had one final card to play. If he was going down, he would take something precious from the humans with him. He pulled up star charts and made a decision that sealed his fate. He ordered his remaining loyal ships to jump to the Sol system. They would attack Earth itself, the human homeworld. Even if they failed, the psychological blow would be worth it. 42 Krultar vessels made the jump to Earth's solar system. They emerged from faster-than-light travel, expecting to find a lightly defended planet, perhaps some orbital stations and civilian traffic. Instead, they found themselves staring at humanity's true home defense. And every single one of Kralthor's remaining officers realized they had made a terrible, fatal mistake. Earth's moon was not a moon anymore. It was a fortress. Mars bristled with weapons that were now coming online. The asteroid belt was revealing itself to be full of automated defense platforms, and Earth itself was surrounded by a defensive grid that made the New Haven battle look like a minor skirmish. Admiral Chen's voice came over every channel, broadcasting to Kralthor's fleet and to the entire galaxy. Welcome to Sol System. Welcome to humanity's cradle. This is where we learn to fight. This is where we learn to survive. And this is where you will learn what happens when you threaten our home. The defense grid activated, and Kralthor finally understood the depths of his mistake. The humans had not just been preparing for war. They had been preparing for invasion, and they had turned their own home system into the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. His last thought before human weapons found his ship was that perhaps the humans had been showing mercy all along. Perhaps everything they had done so far had been restraint. The Krolthar fleet had 6 seconds to comprehend what they were facing before the Sol defense grid opened fire. 6 seconds to see that Earth's moon was not a natural satellite, but a weapons platform the size of a small planet. 6 seconds to realize that every single one of humanity's asteroids had been hollowed out, and filled with automated defense systems. 6 seconds to understand that they had just entered the most fortified location in known space. Then the grid activated, and those 6 seconds ended. Tungsten penetrators launched from lunar railguns crossed the distance to the Krulthar fleet at a significant fraction of light speed. Point defense lasers, designed to intercept missiles and debris, were powerful enough to cut through ship hulls like hot knives through ice. Missile swarms erupted from Mars, each weapon guided by artificial intelligence that had spent 2 centuries running combat simulations. Krulthar's flagship, already damaged from the New Haven engagement, took a direct hit from a lunar railgun. The projectile punched through 3 decks before the kinetic energy dispersed itself by turning the ship's interior into a pressure wave that killed everything inside. Krulthar himself died instantly, along with his entire command staff. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted 9 minutes. Not a single Krulthar vessel survived, but the humans did something unexpected. Every escape pod that launched from the dying ships was recovered. Every Krulthar survivor was pulled from the wreckage and given medical treatment. The humans were not interested in genocide. They were interested in sending a very specific message. Admiral Chen watched from his command center as the defense grid powered down. Around him, his staff worked in silence. There was no celebration, no triumph in their voices. They had just killed thousands of beings, and the weight of that reality pressed down on everyone in the room. "Sir, we are receiving surrender requests from the Torgash. Celtrak and Narixian forces across all fronts." Chen nodded. "Accept their surrenders. Collect their prisoners of war. Make sure they receive proper treatment according to the Galactic Conventions on Armed Conflict. We fight to end aggression, not to commit atrocities." His second-in-command looked at him with tired eyes. "Sir, the galaxy just watched us destroy 4 different species' military forces in less than 72 hours. They are terrified of us now. Some are calling us monsters." "Good." Chen's voice was flat. "Let them be terrified. Let them understand what happens when peaceful species are pushed too far. Maybe it will make them think twice before attacking someone else." But privately, Chen felt sick. He had spent his entire military career preparing for this moment, and now that it had arrived, he found no satisfaction in victory. Just a hollow ache where his hopes for a better humanity used to live. The broadcasts of the Sol system defense had been transmitted across the entire galaxy. Every species with communication technology had watched the Krulthar fleet be destroyed. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of species that had been considering aggressive actions against their neighbors suddenly found peaceful solutions to their disputes. Several ongoing conflicts simply ended, with both sides agreeing to negotiations rather than risk attracting human attention. But the victory came with costs that were not measured in ships or weapons. Across human space, people were gathering to mourn. New Haven held memorial services for the 50,000 killed in the initial Krulthar attack. The mining colony that had been destroyed months earlier was finally acknowledged with full military honors for its dead. Every human who had died due to the escalating aggression was remembered, their names read aloud in ceremonies broadcast across all human worlds. Admiral Chen attended as many as he could. He stood in uncomfortable dress uniform, meeting with families who had lost loved ones. Some thanked him for avenging their dead. Others looked at him with hollow eyes and asked why it had taken so long to act. He had no good answers for either group. At one memorial on New Haven, he met a woman named Sarah Ortiz. Her wife had been stationed on one of the orbital platforms that Krulthar destroyed. Sarah had 3 children who now had to grow up without one of their mothers. "Admiral," she said quietly, taking his hand, "I need you to understand something. I'm glad you stopped them. I am grateful you protected us, but I also need you to know that every time I see news about the war, every time I hear about another enemy ship destroyed, I think about other families like mine, Krulthar families who lost someone, and I wonder if there was any way this could have been avoided." Chen had no answer for her. He could only nod and carry her words with him. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council was fracturing. The revelation of humanity's hidden military capacity had shattered the existing power structures. Species that had built their influence on military strength suddenly found themselves outmatched. The Council leadership, which had failed to protect humanity from aggression, now faced calls for dissolution and reform. Ambassador Kowalski returned to the Council chambers 1 week after the fighting ended. The hall was not full this time. Many delegates had returned to their homeworlds to deal with the political chaos. Those who remained were a mix of the genuinely concerned and the desperately calculating. Elena took her position at the human platform. She looked tired, older than she had just days before. When she spoke, her voice carried across the quiet chamber. Humanity did not want this war. We spent 200 years trying to prove that intelligence could overcome instinct, that choice could triumph over nature. We failed, or perhaps you failed us. Either way, the result is the same. A Quillari delegate stood up. It was Thelnora, the scholar who had tried to warn everyone. Ambassador Kowalski, what will humanity do now? You have demonstrated military superiority over most of the coalition combined. Will you seek to dominate us? To reshape the galaxy in your image? Elena met her eyes. No, we will do what we have always done. We will try to build peace, but this time we will do it with open eyes. We spent 2 centuries hoping that others would choose peace if we set an example. We were wrong. So now we will guarantee peace, not through example, but through the certainty of consequences. Another delegate, a Vexian military official, spoke up. Are you threatening us? No. Elena's response was immediate and firm. We are making a promise. Humanity will not expand our territory. We will not seek conquest. We will not dominate trade or politics through military threats. But we will respond to aggression against any species. Not just ourselves. If you attack us, we will defend ourselves. If you attack others, we will intervene. This galaxy will have peace even if we have to enforce it. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some delegates welcomed humanity's protection. Others saw it as imperialism by another name. Still others worried about who would protect them from humanity if humans decided to become the very thing they claimed to oppose. Through it all, Elena stood silent until the noise died down. Then she spoke again, and this time her voice carried something that had been missing before. Vulnerability. You think we want this responsibility? You think we enjoy being the species that has to make these decisions? We spent millennia tearing ourselves apart. We know what power does to those who hold it. We know how easy it is to justify terrible things in the name of peace and security. That is exactly why we hid what we were capable of. We did not trust ourselves with this power. She paused, and in that moment every delegate could see the fear beneath her determination. But you forced our hand. You made us choose between remaining hidden and becoming extinct. So now we all have to live with what we have become. You will have to trust that we will not abuse this power. And we will have to trust ourselves not to become the monsters we fought against in our own history. Thelnora spoke again, her voice gentle. What if you fail that trust? What if humanity becomes corrupted by the very power you now wield? Elena looked at her for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled, though it was one of the saddest smiles anyone in the chamber had ever seen. Then you will have to stop us, the same way we stopped the Krulthar. The same way any species must stop those who abuse power. We do not claim to be perfect. We do not claim to be incorruptible. We only claim to be trying, and we invite you to hold us accountable to that promise. The session ended with no resolutions, no treaties, no formal agreements. But something had shifted. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity had not revealed itself as a conqueror. They had revealed themselves as what they truly were, a species terrified of their own capacity for violence, trying desperately not to repeat their history. In the weeks that followed, Admiral Chen oversaw the processing of prisoners of war. Krulthar was dead, but many of his officers had survived. They were placed in detention facilities that met or exceeded Galactic Convention standards. They received medical care, legal representation, and fair trials. Some were convicted of war crimes for the deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure. Others were released when evidence showed they had only followed orders under duress. Chen made a point of visiting the detention facilities regularly. He wanted to see the faces of those he had defeated, to remember that they were individuals, not just tactical markers on a display. One day he met a young Krulthar officer who had survived the destruction of his ship in the Sol system. The officer, whose name was Throck, looked at Chen with a mixture of fear and curiosity. You could have killed us all. Your weapons could have destroyed every escape pod, every life raft. Why did you not? Chen sat down across from him, suddenly feeling every one of his 73 years. Because that is not who we want to be. Because the moment we start treating lives as expendable is the moment we become the thing we have been running from. Because you are not our enemy. Aggression is our enemy. You are just a soldier following orders. Throck was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that Chen had been asking himself. Was it worth it? All this death, all this destruction, just to make a point about peace? Admiral Chen looked at the young alien and gave the only honest answer he had. I do not know. Ask me again in 50 years and maybe I will have an answer. Right now all I know is that we tried everything else first. This was not our first choice. It was our last choice. As Chen left the facility, he received a message from Earth. The government was recalling him for a ceremony. They wanted to award him medals, honor him as a hero. He almost refused. But his staff convinced him to go. Not for himself, but for the crews who had served under him. They deserved recognition for what they had been asked to do. So Chen returned to Earth, to the planet where humanity had learned both the art of war and the cost of peace. He stood on a stage before crowds of people, accepted commendations from political leaders, and gave a speech that would be remembered for generations. We won, he said simply. We demonstrated military superiority over multiple hostile species. We proved that humanity is not to be threatened or attacked with impunity, and it feels terrible. Because every victory in war represents a failure of everything else we tried first. We celebrate not because we are happy, but because we survived, and we promise to remember these fallen so that we never forget the price of peace. The crowds were silent. Many were crying. This was not the triumphant celebration of a conquering species. It was a funeral for the version of humanity they had hoped to be, and a birth of the species they were forced to become. 3 months after the last shots were fired, the galaxy was still adjusting to its new reality. The Krulthar Empire had collapsed into civil war, as various factions fought over who should lead them. The Torgash clans had withdrawn into their territory and refused contact with outsiders. The Zelthrak Collective was undergoing a political revolution, as their population demanded leadership that would not provoke human retaliation. The Narixian Compact had simply dissolved, its member states choosing independence over continued association with a failed aggressive policy. But the most dramatic change was happening on New Haven, the colony where everything had begun. The orbital stations that Kralthor destroyed were being rebuilt, not just by humans but by volunteers from dozens of species. The Quillari sent engineers. The Voloshian Federation provided materials. Even some reformed Krulthar military units seeking to redeem their species' honor were working alongside humans to repair the damage their warlord had caused. Ambassador Elena Kowalski walked through the construction site, watching aliens and humans work side by side. It gave her a small spark of hope that perhaps something good could come from the tragedy. She was there for a specific purpose. The Galactic Council had finally agreed to hold trials for those responsible for the attacks on human colonies. But humanity had insisted on something unusual. The trials would not be conducted by human judges or even by the Council. Instead, victims' families would serve on the tribunal, with representatives from neutral species providing legal oversight. The first trial was about to begin. Warlord Kralthor was dead, but his second-in-command Thorax had survived. He was being charged with war crimes for his role in targeting civilian infrastructure. The tribunal included Sarah Ortiz, the woman whose wife had died in the initial attack. Also present were families from the mining station destroyed months earlier, and representatives from other affected colonies. Elena watched from the observation gallery as the proceedings began. Thorax was given full legal representation. Evidence was presented carefully with proper chain of custody and verification. Witnesses testified about the attacks, but also about Thorax's behavior during them. Some testimony was damning. Other testimony suggested he had tried to minimize civilian casualties, despite Kralthor's orders. The trial lasted 3 weeks. At the end, the tribunal found Thorax guilty of following illegal orders but acknowledged that he had operated under duress. His sentence was 30 years of reconstruction service on the colonies his actions had damaged. He would work alongside those he had harmed, helping to rebuild what had been destroyed. It was not vengeance. It was justice tempered with understanding, and it sent a message to the galaxy that humanity was serious about holding even themselves to these standards. During the trials, Elena received a visit from Thelnora, the Quillari scholar. They met in a quiet garden in New Haven's main biodome, surrounded by earth plants that were slowly adapting to the colony's soil. I wanted to thank you, Thelnora said softly, for what you showed us. Elena looked confused. Thank me? We revealed ourselves as the most militarily powerful species in the coalition. We killed thousands. What is there to thank? You showed us that power and restraint are not opposites. That strength can coexist with mercy. That even when forced to fight, you tried to preserve life where possible. Thelnora's eyes, large and dark, were filled with emotion. My people have studied violence across the galaxy for centuries. We have seen conquerors who gloried in destruction. We have seen species that killed without thought or remorse. But we have never seen a species that waged war while actively trying to minimize its harm. You are terrifying, Ambassador, but you are also inspiring. Elena sat down heavily on a bench. We are terrified of ourselves. Every day I wake up wondering if today will be the day we lose our way. If today will be the day some human commander decides that mercy is weakness. We built safeguards and oversight and checks on power. But ultimately we have to trust ourselves, and that trust is the hardest thing to maintain. Then let us help you maintain it, Thelnora suggested. My people would be honored to serve as observers and historians, to record what humanity does, to bear witness to your choices, not to judge but to remember, to help you stay accountable to your own ideals. It was the beginning of what would become the Compact of Protected Peace. Over the following months, humanity worked with other species to create a new framework for galactic security. The old council remained for diplomatic matters, but a new institution was created specifically to prevent and respond to aggression. Humanity would maintain their revealed military capacity. They would station fleets throughout the galaxy with the explicit purpose of intervention if any species attacked another, but they would not act alone. Every military action would be observed by representatives from at least 5 other species. Every engagement would be broadcast publicly. Every decision would be documented and reviewed. It was an enormous burden. Humanity was essentially volunteering to be the galaxy's police force, while simultaneously inviting constant scrutiny of their every action. But it was the only way they could think of to wield their power without being corrupted by it. Not everyone agreed with the arrangement. Some human politicians argued that they should leverage their military superiority for economic advantage. Some alien species worried that humanity's promise of restraint would not last, and some radical groups, both human and alien, believed the whole system was doomed to failure. Admiral Chen, now retired, spent his days working with these dissenting voices. He traveled to both human and alien worlds, speaking at universities and military academies. His message was always the same. Power is a burden, not a prize. Those who seek it should not have it. Those who have it must never forget its cost. One day he received an invitation to visit the Krolthar homeworld. The species was still recovering from their civil war, and a new government had been established. They wanted to acknowledge what had happened and to begin the long process of rebuilding relationships with the wider galaxy. Chen accepted the invitation, despite the concerns of his security detail. He traveled to the Krolthar homeworld and was greeted not with hostility but with solemn ceremony. The new Krolthar leadership took him to a memorial they had built for those killed in the war, including their own dead. We do not ask for forgiveness, the Krolthar Prime Minister told him. We only ask that you accept our commitment to change. We were a warrior culture that valued strength above all else. You showed us that true strength is knowing when not to fight. It is a hard lesson, but we are trying to learn it. Chen stood before the memorial and felt tears in his eyes. Among the names carved in stone were Kralthor and his crew, alongside the human victims of the New Haven attack. Enemies remembered together, their deaths acknowledged as the tragedy they were. I am sorry it came to this, Chen said quietly. I am sorry we could not find a way to peace before so many died. The Prime Minister placed a hand on Chen's shoulder, a gesture of respect in Krolthar culture. You gave us chances, many chances. We chose not to take them. That is our burden to carry. 5 years passed, then 10. The Compact of Protected Peace held, though it was tested repeatedly. Small conflicts flared up across the galaxy, and human forces responded as promised. Each intervention was carefully documented, each decision scrutinized. Some interventions were praised as necessary and proportional. Others were criticized as overreach or cultural insensitivity. Humanity accepted both the praise and criticism, adjusting their approach based on feedback. Gradually, something unexpected happened. The galaxy's warrior cultures began to change. Not overnight and not completely, but they changed. The Krolthar developed a new military doctrine focused on defense rather than conquest. The Vexian Empire redirected their martial traditions into competitive sports and honor duels. Other aggressive species found that their young people were less interested in military glory and more interested in exploration and trade. It was not that violence disappeared from the galaxy. Conflicts still arose, but the nature of those conflicts changed. Species thought twice before choosing military solutions. They considered the consequences not just to themselves but to those they might harm. They asked whether a fight was really necessary or just convenient. Ambassador Elena Kowalski, now in her 70s, sat in her office reviewing reports from across the galaxy. Instances of major conflict were down by 70% compared to pre-war levels. Civilian casualties in the conflicts that did occur were down by even more. The galaxy was not perfect, but it was measurably more peaceful. Her assistant, a young human woman named Keiko, brought her a message from the Quillari archives. Thelnora, now elderly herself, had completed her historical analysis of the past 50 years. Her conclusion was simple. Humanity had changed the galaxy not by conquering it, but by forcing it to confront the true cost of violence. Elena smiled and filed the report. Then she prepared for her next meeting, a negotiation between two species arguing over resource rights. It was tedious work, the kind of boring diplomacy that most people ignored, but it was exactly the work that needed to be done. Every dispute solved peacefully was a war prevented. Every negotiation that succeeded was a justification for humanity's choice to reveal themselves. 50 years after the war, Admiral Chen died peacefully in his sleep. His funeral was attended by thousands, including many former enemies. The Krolthar Prime Minister gave a eulogy that moved many to tears. Admiral Chen taught us that the strongest warrior is the one who chooses not to fight. He showed us that victory without mercy is just another form of defeat. He bore the burden of necessary violence so that others might learn the value of peace. We honor him not as a conqueror, but as a guardian. Chen's personal papers were donated to the Quillari archives, where they would be preserved alongside humanity's other historical records. His final journal entry, written 3 days before his death, contained only one sentence. We stayed true. We did not become the monsters we feared. May those who come after us continue the work. The galaxy continued to evolve. New species joined the coalition, and they learned about humanity's role from the beginning. They heard the story of the peaceful traders who revealed themselves as the most powerful military force in known space, and then chose to use that power only in defense of others. They learned about the cost of that choice, the burden it placed on humanity and the constant vigilance required to maintain it. And gradually those new species began to make the same choice. They invested in defense, not offense. They prepared for conflict while hoping never to need that preparation. They built strength not to dominate others but to protect themselves and their neighbors. 100 years after the war, a new generation of humans came of age. They had never known the old days of appearing weak. They had grown up in a galaxy where humanity was respected and, yes, feared. Some of them asked why their ancestors had waited so long to reveal their strength. Why had they allowed themselves to be insulted and attacked? The answer came from history classes that every human child attended. They learned about old Earth, about the wars that nearly destroyed their species. They visited memorials to conflicts fought with nuclear weapons and biological warfare. They studied the peace their ancestors built through painful choice and maintained through constant vigilance. And they understood. Power was not something to celebrate. It was something to carry carefully, always aware of the damage it could cause. They were the descendants of survivors who had learned to restrain themselves, and that restraint was their greatest strength. In the Galactic Council chambers, now reformed and reorganized, a young human ambassador addressed the assembly. Her name was Chen Mei, great-granddaughter of Admiral Marcus Chen. She had inherited her ancestors' sense of duty and his understanding of humanity's unique burden. We stand before you today not as conquerors or rulers, but as fellow travelers in this galaxy. We carry weapons because we must, but we wield them only when all else fails. We maintain our strength because history taught us the cost of being defenseless, but we also remember the cost of being strong. We remember what violence does to those who use it, and we work every day to ensure we never forget. She paused and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from hundreds of worlds. Some were human allies, others were former enemies who had become partners, and still others were new species just learning to navigate galactic politics. Our ancestors wondered what kind of species they wanted humanity to be. They chose to be peaceful despite knowing how to wage war. That choice was tested and proven true. Now we pass that choice to the next generation and the next and the next. We will always be the species that knows how to fight. But more importantly, we will always be the species that chooses not to, unless there is no other way. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then slowly delegates from across the galaxy began to stand, not in fear or submission, but in acknowledgement of a truth they had all learned together. Peace was not the absence of power. Peace was the choice to restrain power, even when restraint was difficult. Especially when restraint was difficult. Elena Kowalski, retired but present in the observation gallery, watched the young ambassador and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had done it. Humanity had revealed what they were capable of, used that revelation to protect others, and managed not to become corrupted by their own strength. It would be an eternal struggle, requiring vigilance and choice in every generation. But they had proven it was possible, and that was the most important victory of all. The galaxy had learned what happens when humans are forced to act, but more importantly, the galaxy had learned what humans chose to do after the fighting stopped. They chose to guard, not to conquer. They chose to protect, not to dominate. They chose to remain human in the truest sense of the word, even when they held the power to be gods. And in that choice, they offered hope to every species in the galaxy. Change was possible. Growth was achievable. The cycle of violence could be broken. It just took courage to make that choice and strength to maintain it. Humanity had spent thousands of years learning that lesson. Now they spent every day teaching it to a galaxy that was finally ready to listen.